You measure a life in two kinds of days: before the cursor moved by itself and after. I'm Ruth Ann Winker, a widowed librarian in Brevard, North Carolina. My daughter, Lila, died in a house fire 15 years ago. Last night at 2:14 a.m., a dead netbook in my attic woke up and typed one word: Mom. I'd sealed that netbook like a secret. Towel, Ziploc, tin, tote, box, no battery. Still, a weak blue eye glowed. Attic light buzzing, dust like ash, cinnamon in the towel from the last week she was alive. The screen was black, one white cursor. Then, if you can see me, please type back. I typed, I'm here. The reply came faster than my breath. It's really you. It's Lila. She wrote from the night she died. Same room, same smoke, hearing her dad yelling her name. Time has a low air. If we write the memories down, the door moves. A brass diary key, 13 invisible steps, 2 green jelly beans, a song on track 3. If the dead give you instructions, you keep your balance on the stairs and you break every other rule. Stay with me. In the next minutes, I'll show you how a librarian opened a door time tried to lock and what walked through when the clock hit 2:14. 15 years ago, I boxed up Lila's life the way I've seen families box up donated paperbacks. Quick hands, label the spine, don't think. I put her medals and choir pins in a rose tin, her Polaroids in an old shoebox, her purple diary with its tiny brass key in a drawer I could not open without feeling dizzy. There was one thing I sealed more thoroughly than everything else. It was the white plastic laptop she called her diary, the little netbook I bought after she begged to type instead of scribble. On its lid, she'd stuck a sunburst sticker she designed in art class. The night after the fire, I wrapped that netbook in a dish towel, slid it into a Ziploc, then into a tin bread box, then into a rubber tote, and finally into a banker's box I marked in black Sharpie, attic, not to be opened.
Grief is not a thunderclap. It's a barometric pressure you learn to breathe. For years, I did my tasks at the county library, checking in returns, mending spines, recommending novels to retirees who loved Civil War diaries, while holding my breath through anniversaries. The day the house burned, the day we laid Lila's ashes in a cedar urn her father made. Cole Hartman, my ex-husband, had hands that understood wood the way some men understand engines. After the divorce, he became a fire investigator, married again, then retired. We were kind to each other when we had to be, and cautious the rest of the time, like neighbors who share a fence but never step into the same yard. So when the cursor moved at 2:14 a.m., it wasn't just the sound of keys tapping that woke me. It was the sound of something I had not heard in 15 years. The specific rhythm of Lila thinking. You can hear thought if you know a person well enough. There is the breath before a question. There is the tiny pause before a joke. There is the heartbeat length of silence when you decide whether to say the truth or the nice version of the truth. I had fallen asleep on the couch with a book face down on my chest. The house was quiet. The fridge hummed. The clock on the stove clicked to 2:14. And from the attic, muffled but unmistakable, I heard the light, fast tapping of a laptop keyboard. When the dad give you instructions, you obey the ordinary rules. Don't run in slippers on the stairs, don't turn your ankle, while breaking the real ones, like never going to the attic at night. I pulled the cord on the attic light. The bulb stuttered awake, washing everything in a tired yellow. Boxes were stacked in knee-high rows like gravestones. Christmas, Cole's tools, camping, taxes 1997 to 2009, and then attic not to be opened. From inside the banker's box came the soft, everyday sound of typing, not mechanical at all. Like rain finds the old nail holes in a roof, something had found its path back to me. I tore the packing tape. Inside, the rubber tote. Inside that, the tin bread box. Inside that, the Ziploc. Inside that, the netbook wrapped in a towel that still smelled faintly of cinnamon because I laundered the towel the last week Lila was alive, the week we baked snickerdoodles while she practiced solos in the kitchen. The netbook's power light glowed a weak blue. I had removed the battery the day I sealed it up. I remember the way the tiny rectangle looked in my hand, heavy for its size, how I slipped it in a drawer. The drawer had been emptied when I moved to this house 12 years ago. I never found the battery again. But there the light was, blue, unwavering, like an eye that had stayed open the whole time I refused to look. The screen was black except for a thin white cursor in the center. I touched the lid with 2 fingers because that is how you touch the past, like it might break into splinters. The cursor slid to the left edge and began to type, 1 letter at a time. Mom? You can die and still live inside a single word. The floor of my chest dropped 2 inches and all the air went cold. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I didn't know how to put my mouth on a sound that wouldn't turn into a sob. On the screen, a new line appeared.
The attic light flickered. The house shifted the way old houses do when night cools the nails and loosens the wood. I set the netbook on a crate and lowered myself cross-legs on the dusty floor like a child before a campfire. I put my hands on the keyboard. They shook. I typed, "I'm here." The reply came so quickly I flinched. "It's really you." "Who is this?" A pause. 3 dots appeared on the screen, not a text bubble, just a flicker of pixels, as if someone on the other end had learned the way our century shows waiting. Then, "It's me. It's Lila." If grief is a lake, this is the moment the wind skims it in one direction, and then, without warning, in the other, leaving a crosshatch of waves that cancel each other out and double each other and make the surface look like glass and storm at once. I typed without letting myself tell my hands what I was doing. "Where are you?" "In the house, Mom. In my room. It's smoky. I can't feel heat. It smells like it did. The hall light is blinking. I can hear Dad downstairs. He's yelling my name. I keep typing, but I don't think you can see." I did not move. 15 years collapsed into a pinpoint so thin it had no width at all. I read the line again. "I can hear Dad downstairs." Cole had been working the night shift at the hardware store, stocking shelves, when Lila called him because I was at the library late shelving a donations cart. I remember the sound I made when I saw the glow from the highway. I remember running toward the impossible light. I remember Cole barrel sprinting toward the door until the porch collapsed. The firefighter with the red beard held him back, arms locked around his chest, while my husband made a sound I had never heard come from a human throat. Later, when they sifted the ashes and explained what smoke does to lungs, how quickly, I nodded like a good student in a class no one should have to take. I typed. What year is it for you? Autumn. I fell asleep to music and woke up to the smell of the heater and something else. And now the door won't open right, and the screen keeps smearing when I touch it, and the typing gets fuzzy, like it's going through water. I think I'm dreaming. Did I fall asleep again? No, baby. I was a breathless animal now, typing without punctuation the way crying removes commas from speech. I am here, and it is 2025, and I can see your words, and I am not leaving. Do you understand me? I am not leaving. She did not answer in words. The cursor paused and then drew a single heart with the number keys in brackets, the way she used to do sometimes when she wanted to make me laugh at the silliness of it. I cupped my hand over my mouth, swallowing a sound so it wouldn't scare the air. Tell me something only I would know, I typed. Not to test her, but to give the future a foothold in the past. The answer came like the snap of a dish towel. Tuesday, you hide the cream in the cabinet above the stove because Mrs. Blanchard from church says dairy is bad for your joints, and you don't feel like explaining. And the reason you always pick the 2 green jelly beans from me from the bottom of the bag is because I think they taste like spring. I went down the attic stairs as if following a rope and came back with the jelly beans from the pantry. I set them on the floor beside the laptop. When you feed a ghost, you do it with small, precise offerings. I wiped my face with my sleeve and typed, I can't bring you here. I can bring me to you. Don't, she typed, and then the letters faded and returned, as if the line itself was struggling to remain. It's not like walking down a hall. It's like trying to pull a shadow through glass. But you can send me a path. A path? Dad says in a fire, you look for the low air because smoke rises. Maybe it's like that. Maybe there's low air for time.
I read the sentence 3 times before it opened like a good poem. Sometimes children are the only ones brave enough to name things without apology. I scrolled up and saw the first line again. Mom? I scrolled down and hovered over the keys. I typed, What do you need me to do? Leave the laptop on. Every night at 2:14, I'll try. I think the house breeze then. It sounds like the heater, but it's not. Also, I keep seeing the same things on a loop until I write them down. When I write them down, they move. That's the only way they move. Will you help me move them? Yes. She wrote, The lamp is on my desk. The diary is under it. The first page is about the soccer game where I missed the penalty, and you said missing is a kind of trying, and that's not failure. If you can read it, that means the door opened a little. I looked at the netbook's clock, 2:26. I put my hand on the cool plastic. I whispered to an empty attic like it was a bed where someone could hear me across an ocean. Okay, baby, I'll meet you here tomorrow. I did not sleep the rest of the night. I put the netbook on the coffee table and sat on the couch like a watchman. Morning brought ordinary light like a lie that keeps you functional. I called in sick to the library. I told no one because how do you say, my dead daughter typed me a message? I have to sit by the machine that connects our 2 countries. At noon, I drove to Cole's, then kept driving, then turned around and parked outside his place watching the birch leaves shimmer. He was in the yard, knees dirty, hands deeper in the soil than you'd expect from a man with a bad back. He saw my car, stood, wiped his palms on his jeans, and by the time I stepped out, he knew. People who have buried a child recognize a particular urgency. What is it? He asked, not sounding afraid, sounding like a firefighter raises his chin when a door groans. Come tonight, I said. We have to be at the house at midnight. His jaws set, then softened. Ruth, you sure you want? I am beyond wanting, I told him. My voice is stranger. I need. We didn't go to the old foundation often. Insurance and grief and county ordinances left a lot of vacant rectangle with a foundation footprint like a scar. Over the years, the concrete had cracked and creeped with moss. The mailbox, though, still had Hartman on it in my black vinyl letters, peeled at the edges like time had nibbed it with teeth. We stood at the property line and I said, I hear her. The way some people say, there's a fox behind the shed. Cole nodded like he'd expected that sentence his whole life without knowing it. He looked older in a way that had nothing to do with hair or middle. He looked like a man who understood the difference between law and love and knew which one he'd choose in a fire. At midnight, we climbed the low stone wall and stood in the footprint of our living room. The air smelled faintly of ash after rain, a scent that doesn't belong to any season. There were fireflies in the yard next door and a light in the distant kitchen of a house I didn't know, and somewhere a dog's collar jingled. When a breeze moved, it rolled down the hill the way hills breathe, and if you've lived in the same county long enough, you know the way certain winds carry certain histories. Cole reached for my hand without any performance in it. He was the only witness I wanted and the only person who could break me if he said the wrong thing. He didn't say anything. He just stood there with me, and the space where the stairs once were felt like it was listening. At 2:14 a.m., the air shifted. It wasn't colder. It was thinner, like an elevator drops that 1 inch when you don't expect it. A faint sound rose that if I had to write it down for a record, I'd call it electricity. Not buzzing, not humming, more like a history of humming. I felt it in my teeth. The lot brightened by a shade that had nothing to do with moonlight. Then very quietly, very precisely, we heard typing. Where? Cole whispered. In the attic, I said. And then I laughed, a single broken sound because there was no attic anymore. He squeezed my hand harder until I could tell how much he was not breathing. I can't see a device, but I can feel it. Close your eyes, I told him. She says things move when she writes them down. We stood there with our eyes shut like pilgrims. The air thinned a little more, and then, as quickly as it rose, the sensation softened. Cole opened his eyes, let go of my hand, and touched his chest like there was an ache there. We need a path, he said, unprompted, as if he'd been in the attic reading the exchange over my shoulder. I looked at him. He didn't meet my eyes. He was watching the absence of our front door, the rectangle where hinges used to be. The second night, the netbook was waiting on the coffee table like an altar. I had set a glass of water beside it and 2 green jelly beans and the cedar box with her choir pen. At 2:14, the cursor blinked and then moved with the eagerness of a child whose turn has come. Mom, I'm here. Dad, too? He's here, I typed, and felt the consent in my rib cage like a door latch. Hi, kiddo, Cole said out loud, because that was his way. On the screen, the letters came. Hi, Dad. Where are you in the house? I typed. Bedroom, lamp on, closet open. The mirror is cracked in the corner where I chipped it trying to hang the string lights. And I told you a fib that I tripped, so I didn't have to tell you I used a push pin with my hand. But you knew, because moms always know about push pins. Cole laughed. A sound like something old in him released a hinge. He knelt so his face was level with the screen, and he said, I forgive you for the pushpin, baby. "You didn't have to forgive me," she wrote. "You already forgave me when you bought the lights." I typed, "The diary under the lamp. Can you read it?" "If I read it," the sentence opens, "it's like those library doors with the motion sensor, Mom, except it needs memory to trigger it. If I remember, it lets me walk through, but only until I forget. That's why I have to write it, not just think it. Will you read it with me?" I typed yes. "Okay," it says, "the day after the soccer game, we drove to the thrift store and you told me to pick 3 things I would never have picked. You said I should trust what I disliked. You bought a mustard yellow sweater and I said you looked like school cafeteria soup. You wore it anyway, and 3 different people told you you looked brave in that color. You said, 'See, sometimes the world likes our courage better than our taste.'" "That sounds like you," Cole said softly. "And it does," I typed. "Good. That means the door is opening. I can hear the heater trying to turn on. I can smell cinnamon. If you turn on the music I fall asleep to, it might help me remember the next page. It's track 3 on the CD you hide under the driver's seat, so Dad won't say it's too sad." We looked at each other and did not smile. He went to the garage and came back with the ancient CD in its cracked jewel case, songs she called rain music. I slid it into the old stereo because there are some machines you do not give away even after the world replaces them. When the 3rd track began, the attic light didn't flicker this time. The netbook screen brightened. The letters grew a little smoother at the edges, as if they'd been trying to hold themselves together with grit and had finally found mortar. "There's a window, Mom. It's small. It's behind the dresser. If you push the dresser back, the window opens to the back field where the lightning bugs are. It's like that here. There's a tiny window behind the heavy thing. If you can push the heavy thing, I think I can fit through." "What is the heavy thing?" "The part where time says stop." I typed without looking at my fingers. "Tell me how to push." "You'll need Dad's eyes. You'll need your hands. You'll need the diary. And you'll need a key." The brass key to the purple diary was in the same bread tin as the netbook batteries I never found. I knew where the key was because my hands knew before my head could name it. I went to my bedroom, reached into the cedar box with the choir pen, and on the bottom was the tiny key. I held it between my thumb and index finger, and I said, "We're listening." "If you come to the lot again at 2:14, stand where the stairs used to be. Put the key on the concrete and say my name. Dad has to count the steps the way he did when we carried the couch. He'll remember the number. Then open the diary. You don't have to have the diary there. The diary is the thing we're doing, not the paper. It's the remembering. But do it like a ritual. Rituals make stubborn doors believe we belong." We returned the 3rd night with a thermos of coffee and the bravery you borrow from rules you don't understand but obey. At 2:12, the world was as it always is, crickets and distant tires, air like a cold cloth. At 2:13, the lot felt like a magnet. At 2:14, the air thinned. We stood where the stairs used to be, Cole closed his eyes and without me prompting began counting under his breath 1, 2, 3 in the exact cadence he'd used the afternoon we wrestled the old couch up the steps because we refused to pay the delivery boys to scratch our banister. He finished 13 and put his hand where the landing would have been. I set the brass diary key on the concrete at that invisible edge. I said Lila's full name, the way you do when you baptize a thing with the truth it carried and had to lay down.
The air leaned toward us. I opened a blank notebook I'd brought because sometimes you must respect an idea literally. I wrote the first sentence I could think of that was hers. Today I missed the penalty and Mom said missing is a kind of trying. Then I wrote a second. Today we bought the mustard sweater and decided to trust the wrong color. And then I wrote, today the house breathed and we were allowed to hear it. Beside my boot, a small white moth lifted from the concrete, darted toward the invisible landing and vanished like it had flown through a pane of glass with the window open. Cole inhaled sharply. He looked at me not as an ex-husband and not as a man who knows about arson patterns and flashover, but as a father who has just seen the corner of the photograph move under the glass. Again, he said hoarsely. We repeated the steps. At 30 seconds past 2:15, the electric feeling gathered to a point the way light does when it hits a prism. The lot brightened. Cole said, "Do you smell cinnamon?" And I nodded, crying and smiling and not looking away from the air in front of us because it felt rude to blink. The concrete under the key warmed. The key rattled once and lay still. And in the netbook back at my house, which I hadn't brought but had left open on the coffee table with a third track on loop, the cursor typed on its own while no one watched. The door is moving. The next nights were a kind of work I have no name for. We did things that looked, to a stranger, like nonsense. We placed objects on the old foundation in the shape of a room that no longer stood, a teacup where the shelf had been, the green jelly beans where the desk would be, Cole's tape measure across empty air like a ribbon that marked the distance from one side of before to the other. We brought the kitchen chair and set it at the edge and counted to 13. I wrote in the notebook the scenes Lila offered, the soccer field drag of wet grass, the way rain matted her hair, the brittle bravery when a friend made a cruel joke about her thrift store dress and she laughed before she cried. With each scene that we remembered into the world, the lot leaned a fraction more toward us. On the 6th night, we found what the county map called a subsurface void. A section of the foundation had settled around a pocket left by a part of the crawl space that never collapsed. Cole tapped the concrete with a rubber mallet and listened the way a carpenter listens for hollowness. He lay on his stomach at the edge and shone his penlight until he said, very quietly, "There's space." How much space? Enough for a person to lie down and not be crushed, he said. He is not a man who says miracles. He is a man who says measurements when he wants to cry. He went to his truck for a masonry chisel and a pry bar. We should not be doing this without a permit, he muttered, because men who follow rules need to curse them out loud once before they break them. We made a rectangle the size of a crawl space access. Underneath, cool air moved like breath coming from a room where someone is sleeping.
I'm going first, I said, already lowering myself to my elbows. The hell you are, he said, and then softer, hold my belt. He slid into the space like he was slipping between two parts of a story. He disappeared to his shoulders and then to the heels of his boots. For a moment, I hated every god and angel and force in the universe for the fact that there is always a way to lose the same person twice. He called back up, voice echoing, "It's bigger than it should be. There's a pocket." His flashlight beam reappeared, then his body, dusty, his hair coated in a gray that looked like snow. In his hand, he held something small and plastic and white with a sunburst sticker. It was the bottom half of Lila's old netbook. "It was here," he said in awe and panic, because all is panic in its Sunday clothes. "But how did—" "Time dropped crumbs for itself," I said, and that was nonsense and true. He set the bottom half on the concrete, like a museum exhibit. "If there's the bottom," I began, "there might be the top," he finished and went back down. He returned with a ribbon of melted CD jewel case, a metal bookmark she loved that said readers never really go anywhere alone, and a small warped plastic picture frame. The photo inside had fused to the glass and blurred so that the three of us looked like a family underwater, which is not wrong. "Enough," he coughed. "Air's not good down there. We need a fan and masks if we're going to play mole." We brought a box fan the next night, extension cord coiled like a sleeping snake. We had cloth masks because the world had taught us once how to wear them, and then we forgot, and then we had to remember again. The netbook typed at 2:14. "The window is bigger. I can feel the night air. It tastes like the field, the clover sour and the dirt metal. Mom, if I step through, it might be fast. I might not look like the last time you saw me. Will you be okay if I don't look the same?" "Yes," I wrote, and my tears dropped on the keyboard because that is how yes looks sometimes. "I do not need a photograph as proof of you. I need your voice. I need your hand. Come how you come." "Dad, I'm here," he said as if he were standing at the foot of his bed the night she was 8 and had a fever and woke from a bad dream. "If other voices try to push through at the same time, close the door." "How do we close it?" he asked the room. She typed, "Say my full name with love." The 8th night was a Tuesday, the kind of clear where the stars look like a net someone has thrown just right. We arrived at 1:50 with coffee and a sort of courage I do not recommend, like the courage you have when you're about to apologize for something you did wrong because love is more important than winning. We set the brass key, the jelly beans, the bookmark, the netbook bottom, and the picture frame in a half circle where the stairs would have been. I placed the notebook open to a fresh page. I wrote, "Today is the day. I don't know how I know, but I do." At 2:14, the electric sound rose so strongly it pressed against our palms. The air brightened with a color that isn't in the Crayola box, somewhere between blue and memory. The concrete warmed under our feet. Cole began to cry without a sound because men who have held their breath for 15 years must either break or soften, and he softened. A shape stepped through the air. For a second, it was not a person, but the idea of one, like the paper outline an art teacher pins up to show you where muscles belong. Then the outline found itself. It filled in from the feet up, not with flesh exactly, but presence that became flesh as it remembered. The body shaped itself to the years as if it had kept count elsewhere. Longer bones, new strength in the shoulders, the small scar above the eyebrow she got when she and Cole collided in the driveway playing basketball. Hair darker at the roots, lighter at the ends, like she'd been in sun in a place where sun has a different gravity. When the face finished building itself, the mouth curved in a smile that broke me in the good and terrible way only your child's smile can. Brand new and older than Rome.
"Hey," she said. Her voice was her voice, only deeper by a note, the way a saxophone is the same as a clarinet, and also not. "Am I late for curfew?" I did not run to her because some part of me knew that if you touch a thing too quickly, it startles. I stepped forward the way you step to a deer that has decided not to bolt. I held out my hand. She took it, palm to palm, and the place where our hands touched was the only temperature that has ever mattered to me. Cole made the sound that is between a laugh and a sob and wrapped his arms around both of us with such careful force you would think we were glass and also made of mountains. Behind Lila, in the opening that wasn't a door and was, the air moved like the surface of a pond when a fish turns over. A voice, not a voice, the insistence of one, pressed against the threshold, a hard palm against the soft place. The night went colder on that edge the way the shadow of a hawk makes the air cold. Lila lifted her head from our embrace and spoke over my shoulder to the not door. "No," she said gently, the way you say no to a toddler with a handful of screws. "Not you. Not now." The pressure softened. Cole whispered her name the way a prayer is a name. "Lila Hartman," he said, full and steady. The knot door loosened and then closed the way a thought closes when you fall asleep. We did not drive anywhere. We did not call anyone. We sat on the cold foundation and we held our daughter while the stars told no one. I asked the small questions first because those are the ones that make a life. Are you hungry? Do you hurt? Do your feet feel like you've been standing too long? She laughed softly and said, "Not exactly." And I heard the years in the humor, the way she had learned to be gentle with the living. We walked her to the truck like we were walking a bride to a car someone tied cans to. Every ordinary thing was having its baptism. The seatbelt click, the way headlights skim across a stop sign, the way old gravel remembers every tire. When we got home, she stood in my kitchen and closed her eyes and said, "The heater," and smiled. In the morning, she was the age she should be and also an age I don't have numbers for. She moved through the house like a new tenant and a historian. She touched the bookshelf the way a pianist touches closed keys, not to play, to check the tuning. She pressed her palm to the cold window pane and said, "I knew it was this room, though she had never slept in this house." The netbook on the coffee table was black, the light off. I touched it with my fingertip. No power. The brass diary key was warm. Lila picked it up, squinted at the tiny teeth and said, "We should keep it where keys go," and slid it onto the ring with my house, the mailbox, and the shed. I had thought the hard part would be the miracle. I was wrong. The hard part is breakfast. Do you make oatmeal like you did when she was in 8th grade and refused to eat eggs because eggs are like the idea of a chicken and it felt wrong? Or do you ask what she likes now? Do you watch to see what her hands choose? She chose toast with butter and sugar the way you sneak it in the kitchen when no one is watching and then grin like a thief when your mother catches you. She looked at the sugar bag on the counter and said, "You still label them?" And I said, "Yes." And we both laughed because you can measure a life by jar labels too. Cole came at 10 with a brown paper bag from the bakery that still uses wax paper instead of plastic. He carried a folded newspaper as if he had picked it up out of habit and then remembered no one reads the paper in print anymore. He set it on the table like an offering to whatever gods govern mornings. He looked at Lila like a man who has decided to let mystery reorganize the furniture in his house. "We're going to need a story," he said, grief brave and practical, "for the law, for the DMV, for hospitals, for taxes, for anything that requires us to say a thing that makes sense." Lila sat at the table and folded and unfolded the paper bag. "Tell them I went missing at 15, she said. "Tell them there was a mistake at the scene, that I spent years away and that I have amnesia, and that the man who found me at the bus station recognized me because I have your eyes. Tell them it will take time to prove what's already true." Cole breathed out carefully. "People will ask where you've been." "Tell them a long way.
she said softly. Tell them I worked at a diner shaped like a horseshoe and learned how to pour coffee without spilling, and met a woman who taught me how to keep my voice calm when somebody is loud, and that there was a room with bookshelves where time bent a little and I helped close a door the wind kept opening. Tell them I came back because I remembered the jelly beans and the mustard sweater and the way Dad counted the steps when we carried the couch, because he always counts when he has to lift something heavier than he can by himself. Cole pressed his thumb and forefinger to the bridge of his nose and said, "That'll do," which is his way of saying, "This is impossible and my heart agrees anyway."
We asked our friend Kai, who handles complicated truths at the county, to help us make the papers look right. He arrived at dusk with a laptop and a shirt that still had dry cleaner creases. He is the kind of man who will tell you he has never seen a ghost and then do what the ghost asks because he believes in clean forms and the quiet rules. I introduced him to my daughter. He did not look away. He did not make a joke. He said, "Hello, Lila," like it was the first line in a new book, and opened his laptop. The first week, Lila slept like someone who has learned to sleep in a world where sleep isn't necessary. She lay on the couch with the sun in her hair and the cat curled to her knees, like the cat had been waiting 15 years for this exact shaped lap. She went on walks with me in the late afternoon when the mountains throw long blue shadows, and didn't falter when a neighbor looked at her the way you look at someone you recognize from a photograph that has always sat on someone's mantle. At the grocery, she stopped before the tea aisle as if reading a menu in a foreign country in a language she used to know. She picked the chamomile with the blue label because that was the one with the sailboat picture she liked when she was 12. In the parking lot, a woman from church said, "Hey, Ruth Ann, who's this?" And Lila extended her hand like a person who knows how to meet strangers and said, "I'm family. Staying a while?" And the woman smiled and said, "Well, we're glad to have you, because the South will accept any miracle if you set it on the table and pass it right." The questions we did not ask were not because we were afraid of answers. They were because sometimes naming a thing too early drives it back into the woods. But one night on the porch, under a sky that knew our names, I asked, "Do you miss it?" I didn't have to specify what it was. "Sometimes," she said. So honestly, it unlaced something in me. There were rooms there where the air didn't belong to anyone yet. There were books with blank pages that filled themselves if you chose the first sentence brave enough. There were people made of shadows who were not frightening at all, but there were others. She looked at the dark line of trees, the angry ones, the ones who didn't know what to do with a door except kick it. "Do they still know where the door is?" I asked. She said, "I closed it, but doors remember. You have to keep them taut." She tapped the railing gently as if reminding a dog to heel. "It helps if you say my name out loud. It helps if you put the key somewhere sensible. It helps if Dad doesn't leave his toolbox open." "I won't," Cole said from the doorway, like he'd been there a while, listening and learning. He sat on the step behind us with his knees up like he was back in the yard waiting out the rain. He said to Lila, "You look like your mother," which is something men say when they are telling you time is gloriously broken. She said, "Good. I picked that on purpose."
We fell into a rhythm I would not have believed if you told me it had already been laid out for us on a map. Morning was coffee and Kai emailing updates about forms and signatures, and we're calling it a clerical misidentification. Afternoon was teaching Lila the ways our city had changed. The little coffee hut where they roasted beans like a ritual. The footbridge over the river where teenagers took their graduation photos. The new stop sign that made no sense. Evening was supper with the TV on low to teach her the new names of the loud people in charge. Night was sometimes tears, but mostly not. Mostly it was all of us learning the choreography of a living room again without bumping elbows. The first time a stranger recognized Lila, it was at the farmer's market. The woman selling blackberries stared for a beat longer than polite and then said, "You look like Ruth Ann's girl." And Lila held her gaze level and said, "I'm Ray," because we had agreed she would use her middle name for a while until the rest of the world caught up. The woman nodded with the speed of someone who had just rearranged 2 shelves of information in her mind and decided both arrangements could be true. "Well, Ray," she said, "you want an extra carton? These are sweeter than last week's." Lila said yes, and the woman tucked a paper carton into our bag like a kindness no one would mention again. There were stumbles. Once at the post office, a man with a veteran's cap asked Lila where she'd served, because there is a way a person stands when they have learned to be alert in a place with rules that change. Lila said, "Not where you have." And the man smiled 1,000 miles wide and said, "That's service too," and saluted a little with 2 fingers like a joke only the kind know. Another time, in line at the DMV, a clerk with a buzz cut and a suspicion face looked at the temporary documents Kai had arranged and asked questions that were not questions at all. Lila answered calmly until the clerk ran out of ways to make her voice a hammer. She stamped the paper and said, "Next," to no one because the line had watched us and decided to be gentle. The day we took Lila to the lot again, it had been 3 weeks. I brought the brass key in my pocket because some habits are a prayer you never stop saying. We stood in the footprint of the room where the couch once fit if you shoved just right. Lila closed her eyes and breathed. "It's quieter," she said, "but the quiet isn't nothing. It's like the time after a storm when the birds check with each other to see if anyone is missing." She knelt where the stairs had been and touched the concrete. She whispered something too soft for me to hear and then smiled like the air had answered. She set a single green jelly bean on the concrete and got to her feet. "We should go," she said. "Not afraid, just respectful." "Will it open again?" Cole asked. "Yes," she said. "That's what doors do, but you can make it open for the right reasons." She took my hand and slid the key into my palm. "Put it somewhere messy, not sacred," she said, "like the junk drawer. Sacred makes it too clean. This is a key for real life, not church." I keep the key in the junk drawer. Sometimes I let my fingers find it without looking. Paper clips, spare fuses, the key's cool brass face. I can tell you the exact moment I realized this is how I would tell the story. It was a Saturday. I was putting away the shopping, and Lila had left a note on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a pineapple. She'd written, "Buy more green jelly beans," a joke that has become a ritual, that has become a way to measure time. I rested my head against the fridge and laughed until I cried, which is how you do both kinds of weather at once. There are things we don't talk about on the internet because the internet takes your story and edits you out of it. But there are also people who might be standing in their kitchens at 2:14 a.m., hearing a sound they told themselves was the heater. This is for them. If a door opens that shouldn't, you can close it with a name and love in your voice. If a message comes from a machine that should be dead, answer like it's a neighbor knocking on your back porch because there's a storm coming and the chickens got loose. If your child comes home looking like time, remember them kindly. Do not ask right away where they've been. Make toast with butter and sugar. Let them pick the tea. Walk them around the neighborhood and introduce them as family. The rest will work itself into the shape it always meant to be. Sometimes at night, when the house is as quiet as a book that hasn't been opened yet, I'll hear a sound that is almost typing. It could be the heater, it could be the oak leaning, it could be memory taking a lap around the room to make sure everything is where it should be. I do not go up to the attic every time. I have learned to live without checking the oven 2 and 3 times. But sometimes I do go up, just to sit with the netbook that no longer glows and tell it about the day. I tell it how Lila laughed so hard at a video of a dog who thinks he is a cat that she dropped her spoon. I tell it how Cole keeps his toolbox closed now without anyone asking, like a soldier who takes off his boots at the door. I tell it how the librarian at the county branch recommended a novel to a woman who hadn't read since her mother passed, and the woman brought flowers a week later because the book made her remember how to sit with difficult light. You might want me to explain the mechanics. I understand. I like a good manual too. But sometimes the only manual that matters is the one written in the margins of a life, the places where you wrote, don't forget, the alarm code, the way she likes her tea. The Little Dipper is easiest to find if you look for the saucepan and then count 3 stars out. If you press me for blueprints, I can only offer the measurements we made by feel. 13 steps to the landing, a key no bigger than a postage stamp, 2 green jelly beans, a song 3 tracks in, a name spoken with love, a diary you keep by keeping on. The last thing I will tell you is this. The day Lila went to meet her grandmother at the assisted living center, she took the brass key with her on a string around her neck because she said an old woman likes to see a girl wearing something that means something. Her grandmother is 92 and pretends she doesn't know what year it is so she can set the rules herself. She reached for the key and said that goes to the pantry because in her house, everything worth having is stored where food is. Lila kissed her cheek and said, "Yes, ma'am." And afterward, we sat in the car and laughed until the tears came because there is no word for the happiness that comes when the world makes its own jokes for you. If you were here in my kitchen right now, I would hand you a mug and turn down the music and say, "Listen, do you hear it? That ordinary hum is not the heater. It's the house remembering. It's the page turning at the end of a chapter that didn't know it was allowed to have another one. It's the sound of my daughter upstairs texting me from the second bedroom to bring her the good blanket because the one in the closet smells like cedar and old church. And I will text back a heart made of brackets because there are some languages you never forget. This morning, I labeled the sugar. This afternoon, we will drive to the river and throw bread to the ducks and pretend they know us. Tonight, if the air thins for a second, I will not be afraid. I will say her name full and steady. I will stand where the stairs used to be and count to 13 and then stop counting. Because some days you are allowed simply to live in a house where the doors know you and the windows are not secrets, but promises. I am writing this down so the sentence will move the way she taught me. I am writing this down because diaries answer back when you give them a voice. I am writing this down so that when you hear the typing, you will know to answer to.